Who was Eliza? Why are we here today? To answer those questions, I would like to share with you the Eliza I came to know. She was the firstborn child of President James Monroe and his wife, Elizabeth, and we tend to think of her as a historical figure, someone in the distant past, and peripheral to the well-known story of her father's accomplishments. But she was a real, living, breathing human being who embraced many roles throughout her life. She was a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a many times great-grandmother to her descendants that are here with us today. She was a friend to those close to her and a nurse to those who needed her. When giving a eulogy, one is supposed to start by stating one's name and relationship to the deceased. Telling you my name is easy. I'm Barbara VornDick. It was my privilege to write Eliza's first biography. But explaining my relationship to Eliza is a little more tricky. For you see, I just met Eliza a few months ago at Dulles International Airport in the cargo bay of Air France, when I put my hand on her coffin and welcomed her home. The emotion was overwhelming, and it still is. At that moment, the 2 centuries of time that had separated our lives on earth evaporated, and I was finally at last in the same space and time with the woman I had come to know and respect through my years of researching her life. Precious little had been written about Eliza in the historical record, and what was written was often unflattering and unkind. And I found this pattern in other reports of Eliza's temperament, all lacking concrete examples of actions to back up the accusations. What had she done to warrant those unfavorable descriptions? Though I searched, I could not find the why behind such statements, so I began looking for evidence of Eliza's actions. For it is a person's actions that reveal their true character. We all know the expression, actions speak louder than words. And that is indeed true, even for those who have lived in the past. Actions reveal a person's true nature, their priorities, and the love they hold in their heart. Primary source documents did cast light on Eliza's actions. During her life, letters written by her, to her, and about her, wills, ship's manifests, court proceedings, civil documents, census records. With all of these, I was able to track Eliza's life, placing her in specific locations on specific days, and a picture of this woman who had lived so long ago began to emerge. I started to feel as though I knew Eliza through her own words, through the words of others about her, and the activities in which she engaged throughout her life. And it was an astounding revelation, and very different than the picture that had been painted for the past 2 centuries.
When Monroe became president in 1817, Eliza moved her family into the White House to support her mother, whose health was failing. And at only 30 years old, Eliza took on many of the responsibilities of the First Lady, overseeing social functions and protecting her mother's dignity. She limited public access to protect her mother's declining health, a decision not welcomed in Washington society at that time. The press even nicknamed her Queen Elizabeth, and even John Quincy Adams called her an obstinate little firebrand. In today's world, Eliza would be applauded for her tenacity and resolve. She got things done, even when it was unpopular. But for generations, her reputation was shaped by misunderstandings. Only recently have we come to appreciate the truth of her character and her contributions to our lives. Throughout her life, Eliza demonstrated deep devotion to her family, her compassion for others, and she nursed relatives and even epidemic victims in Washington, D.C. When her mother and husband died within 2 days of each other, I can't imagine that either. In 1830, Eliza handled their affairs and sale of their property, all while caring for her ailing father. 9 months later, President Monroe himself died in her arms. Her daughter died just 3 years later. In 1838, seeking rest and recovery, Eliza sailed to France. But her health declined, and her inheritance was delayed. By 1840, she was in debt, without support and pleading for a place to stay. She died in Paris on January 27, 1840, and was buried in an unmarked grave in Père Lachaise Cemetery, thanks to the kindness of Daniel Brent, a fellow Virginian and a member of Monroe's administration. That story and the evidence behind it only came to light in recent years, buried in forgotten archives. Once we understood the circumstances of her final years, we knew she never meant to die in France. And the right thing, the American thing, the Virginian thing, was to bring her home again. But bringing Eliza home wasn't easy. This repatriation was a grassroots effort, truly a grassroots effort, funded entirely by private donations and driven by dedication and heart. And on behalf of all Virginians and all Americans, I want to thank the many individuals and organizations who made this moment possible.
Eliza possessed extraordinary nursing skills, which she compassionately extended to family, friends, and strangers. The historical record is full of descriptions of Eliza rushing off to help someone who was ill. Her husband describes one such incident in a letter written in 1829. When James Monroe was here in Richmond, and Eliza and her husband were at Oak Hill in Loudoun County, and they had received word that Monroe was very ill. Hay wrote that Eliza, quote, did not hesitate a moment, end quote, before she set out on a 3-day journey to travel to her father's bedside. Hay also wrote that he was concerned Monroe might not recover, but he added that if Eliza could reach her family in time, she could do more help for him than all the doctors. Another example of Eliza placing the needs of others ahead of her own schedule occurred during Monroe's presidency, when Eliza went to the home of Monroe's Secretary of War, John Calhoun, and offered to take care of his young child, who was very ill. Mrs. Calhoun met Eliza at the door, and she said that she understood Eliza was busy planning her sister's wedding at the White House, and told Eliza that she did not need to stay, but Eliza insisted. James Monroe himself stepped in and told the Calhouns to let Eliza take care of the child because she was the best nurse they could have. Eliza stayed up 4 nights with that child. She also nursed the victims of 2 epidemics in Washington, D.C. during her father's presidency, putting aside the danger to her own health. She took care of her husband, mother, and father during their illnesses that resulted in death, all within 10 months of each other. Yet Eliza persevered with remarkable fortitude. A few years later, Eliza suffered the death of her beloved daughter Hortensia, yet Eliza persevered. These actions I have described are only a few of many, which tell us of Eliza's caring and compassionate nature. They help us define her character. They reveal her priorities. They help us to know her. In the 53 years of her life, Eliza, like all of us, experienced triumphs and tragedies, Yet through the loss of loved ones in rapid succession, she persevered in the manner her father had described in that letter he wrote to her years before. She kept moving forward with, as her father wrote, energy of character and firmness of mind. The remarkable strength and fortitude that Eliza possessed became crystal clear to me when I read the last letters of her life. She had traveled to France in 1838 on the advice that a sea voyage might improve her health, but by 1839, her health was declining and she was sinking in debt and despair. She described her situation in a letter this way: I am now in distress, in ill health, and in a foreign country. She detailed that she had been waiting 8 years for the inheritance due her from her father's estate, but she had not received it. And she wrote begging for a place to stay, explaining that rent and the cost of fuel in Paris was very high, and that she was facing utter ruin. A few months later, Eliza wrote her last known letter, and these inspirational words reach out to us from the past and reveal her true nature and strength of character. She wrote, much of human life, my friend, is spent in lamentation and inaction, but that is not my character. I will do all I can to sustain myself, and if I fail, I can only feel that I have done my best. Eliza, we have done our best. To restore your reputation and repatriate your remains to your home, the United States of America. Today marks the end of the Bringing Eliza Home project, but thankfully it is a happy ending. We extend our compassion to Eliza's descendants as we witness the burial of your ancestor. You can be proud of the life she lived and the legacy of her contributions to this nation. She was a woman of devotion and duty, caring and compassion, grace and grit, fortitude and faith.
But this is about paying respect to a woman who served this nation quietly but powerfully during its formative years. Today she rests where she belongs, in Virginia, beside her family, in the soil of the country she served.